The fact of the matter is, we can do all we need to do without punishing anybody. Anybody. The reason I'm optimistic here is, look at who we are. I've met virtually every major world leader in my role as vice president and as foreign relations chairman over the last 30 years. And that's not hyperbole. Virtually every one. I don't know a single solitary one who would not change places with the problems the President of the United States has versus the problems they have. China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the east, in the west. They can't figure out how they're going to deal with the corruption that exists within the system. They're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not they're competition for us.
Latest news, Reuters, dated October 13th, 2021. Headliner, Taiwan says, don't get too close as China defends military drills. Taiwan's defense ministry warned China of strong countermeasures on Wednesday if its forces got too close to the island, as Beijing defended its incursions into Taiwan air defense zone as just moves to protect peace and stability. Military tensions with China, which claims Taiwan as its own territory, are at their worst in more than 40 years, Taiwan's defense minister said last week, adding China will be capable of monitoring a full-scale invasion by 2025. He was speaking after China mounted 4 straight days of mass Air Force incursions into Taiwan's air defense identification zone that began October 1st, part of a pattern of what Taipei views as stepped-up military harassment by Beijing. No shots have been fired. China's aircraft have stayed well away from Taiwan's airspace, concentrating their activities in the southwestern corner of Taiwan's air defense zone. In a report to Parliament, Taiwan's defense ministry said their forces will adhere to the principle of the closer they are to the island, the stronger the countermeasures, though it gave no details. The ministry expressed concern of China's growing prowess with aircraft carriers, nuclear-powered submarines, and amphibious assault ships coming into service. China's capabilities in denying access and blockading the Taiwan Strait are becoming more and more complete, which will pose serious challenges and threats to our defense operations, it added. China blames Taiwan and its most important international backer, the United States, for the tensions. Appoint Ma Xiaogang, spokesman for China's Taiwan Affairs Office, made again in Beijing, pointing the finger at Taiwan's ruling Democratic Party, the DPP. Chinese drills are aimed at collusion with foreign forces, a veiled reference to U.S. support for Taiwan and separatist activities protecting the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. He added, they are absolutely just actions. The DPP authorities' hyping of the so-called military threat of the mainland is to completely invert right and wrong in a bogus accusation, he went on to say. And he would also later add, if the DPP authorities obstinately persist in going about things the wrong way and do not know how to draw back from the edge, it will only push Taiwan into a more dangerous situation. Taiwan says it is an independent country called the Republic of China, its formal name, and will add its freedom and democracy. Despite Ma's comments, both Chinese President Xi Jinping and Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen made relatively conciliatory speeches at the weekend, even as Xi vowed to bring Taiwan under its control, and Tsai said they would not be forced to bow to China. Xi did not mention resorting to force over Taiwan, while Tsai reiterated a desire for peace and dialogue with China. Tsai, speaking at a regular party meeting on Wednesday, reiterated that the government has never slacked off when presented with China's military threats, but has also never advanced rashly. I also want to repeat that we will never succumb to pressure, she added. Headliner, CNN. With all eyes on Taiwan, tensions are building on another Chinese frontier, India, dated October 13, 2021. China's increased military activity in the Taiwan Strait may have grabbed all the headlines of recent weeks. Thousands of miles to the west, another simmering territorial dispute on the country's borders looks most likely to boil over first. Just 16 months ago, Chinese and Indian troops fought a deadly hand-to-hand battle in the Himalayas along the line of actual control, the ill-defined de facto border between the two nuclear powers. And now tensions appear to be rising again. According to unverified reports, troops from both sides have been briefly detained by the other as military positions are fortified and talks to de-escalate the situation seem at an impasse. In 1962, India and China went to war over the remote, inhospitable border regions high in the mountains, eventually establishing the LAC. But the two countries do not agree on its precise location and both regularly accuse the other of overstepping it or seeking to expand their territory. Since then, they have had a series of mostly non-lethal scuffles over the years over the border until the June 2020 clash, the deadliest on the LAC in more than 40 years. The line of actual control is the LAC. After that battle, in which at least 20 Indian and 4 Chinese troops were killed, respective military leaders have held face-to-face talks to dampen lingering tensions. The 13th of those meetings was held Sunday, and it didn't end well. Earlier discussions had made some progress in calming the border, but a statement from the Indian Defense Ministry on Monday accused China of no longer cooperating. The Indian side pointed out that the situation along the LAC had been caused by unilateral attempts for the Chinese side to alter the status quo and in violation of the bilateral agreements, the statement said. It also went on to say the Indian side, therefore, made constructive suggestions for resolving the remaining areas, but the Chinese side was not agreeable and also could not provide any forward-looking proposals. Beijing sees the situation differently. China has made great efforts to promote the easing and cooling of the border situation and fully demonstrated its sincerity in order to maintain the overall situation of the relations between the two militaries. However, India still insisted on the unreasonable and unrealistic demands, which made the negotiations more difficult, said a statement from Colonel Long Shaoua, spokesman for the People's Liberation Army Western Theater Command. An extensive article in Chinese state-run Global Times tabloid ratcheted up the rhetoric, accusing India of triggering new incidents along the eastern section of the border. After reports earlier this year that real progress was being made, including satellite photos showing China dismantling border garrisons, the Himalayan flashpoint has largely fallen off the world's radar, even more so given the recent focus on Taiwan. But over the past few weeks, both Indian and Chinese media have run stories about the unverified fresh confrontations along the LAC, all of which have reportedly been resolved peacefully. The Global Times said the unverified encounters had strained relations along the border. The report went on to say Chinese experts have warned of the risks of new conflict, saying that China should not only refuse to give in to India's arrogant demands at the negotiating table, but also be prepared to defend against new Indian military aggression. That was followed by claims from PLA garrisons on the Himalayan frontier describing tense daily working conditions. With alarms going off, commanders leading patrols at the front and soldiers writing appeals for battle assignments, according to the Global Times. The report also touted Chinese efforts to build infrastructure in the region, saying the moves had boosted troops' morale and ability to move hotspots along the LAC. As to why the India-China border situation should be heating up now, Chinese state media offers a familiar answer. Just as it does concerning tensions over Taiwan, near which Chinese warplanes have flown more than 150 sorties this month alone, Global Times points a finger at the United States. India sees that Washington attaches great importance to New Delhi, as U.S. President Joe Biden had frequently interacted with the Indian government since taking office, and jointly discuss plans to thwart China's growth. Lin Min Wang, professor with the Institute of International Studies at Fudan University, is quoted as saying as in the Global Times report. Indeed, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi joined Biden and the Prime Ministers of Australia and Japan in Washington last month for the first in-person meeting of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, better known as the Quad, an informal strategic forum of 4 democratic countries with a vested interest in countering China's rise in Asia. In an opinion piece after the Quad Summit, Li Haidong, professor at the Institute of International Relations of the China Foreign Affairs University, wrote the Quad members will not stop hyping up the China threat theory. Amid the PLA Air Force incursions around Taiwan earlier this month, the Global Times said the U.S. and Japan were pushing the situation around the self-ruled island to the brink, creating a sense of urgency that the war may be triggered at any time. And a headline over Monday's Global Times story on the Himalayas said PLA border troops were prepared for upcoming confrontations. Taiwan and the Himalayas may be 2,800 miles apart in completely different environments, but in both territorial disputes with Beijing, the temperature appears to be rising. And according to China, the U.S. is at the center of it all. Al Jazeera headliner, CIA announces new mission focus solely on China. Dated October 7th, 2021. The United States Central Intelligence Agency has announced a new group that will focus solely on China and their strategic challenges posed by Beijing. In a statement on last Thursday, the CIA said the China Mission Center was formed to address the global challenge posed by the People's Republic of China that cuts across all of the agency's missions areas. The group is just one of the fewer than a dozen mission centers operated by the CIA and will hold weekly director-level meetings meant to better coordinate the agency's strategy toward China. It will address global issues critical to U.S. competitiveness, the CIA said, such as emerging technologies, economic security, climate change, and health challenges. CIA Director William Burns said the new mission center will further strengthen our collective work on the most important geopolitical threat we face in the 21st century, an increasingly adversarial Chinese government. Throughout our history, CIA has stepped up to meet whatever challenges come our way, Burns said in a statement last Thursday, and now focusing our toughest geopolitical test in a new era of great power rivalry. CIA will be at the forefront of this effort. The announcement comes amid a wider prioritization by the administration of President Joe Biden on countering Beijing. And in June, Biden announced a new task force at the Pentagon to assess and respond to Beijing's military challenge. China is considered an especially difficult challenge for the U.S. intelligence community, given the insularity of its Communist Party leadership, its large military and security services, and its development in advanced technologies that can counter spying. Underscoring the challenge, the CIA recently sent a memo to its agents around the world, admitting that it was experiencing a shortage of informants from other countries, with some captured or killed, the New York Times and the Washington Post reported. The CIA and FBI recently unearthed dozens of cases of Chinese recruiting U.S. citizens to supply it with classified or corporate priority information, as well as instances of Chinese citizens working in the United States as intelligence collectors. The CIA also reported last Thursday that it will designate a chief technology officer for the first time as part of a broader effort to implement advanced computing methods at its agency. Jens Stoltenberg, NATO's Secretary General, spoke with Politico just last week, in which he told Politico, quote, "We don't regard China as an adversary or an enemy. We need to engage with China on important issues such as climate change. There's no way to reduce emissions enough in the world without including China. We need to discuss arms control with China. So we need to engage politically with China. At the same time, we see the rise of China. We see that China soon will have the biggest economy in the world. They already have the second largest defense budget. They have the largest Navy already. They are investing heavily in new modern capabilities, including nuclear capabilities. They are leading in the use of many new disruptive technologies, such as artificial intelligence, also integrating into new, very advanced weapon systems. And we see a much more assertive China, for instance, in the South China Sea. All of this matters for our security, and therefore NATO has responded to that. He also went on to say, on the link between climate change and security, it will affect the way we conduct military operations with extreme heat, with increased sea levels, and it will affect naval bases and military installations. We have NATO soldiers operating in Iraq. They have more than 50 degrees Celsius there for many days last year. NATO has a role to play to get down the emissions because more and more countries now agree that they should go down to net zero emissions of greenhouse gases. And then we have to also reduce emissions from military operations. Why is China a threat? When just 2 years ago, President Joe Biden had announced, President-elect Joe Biden had announced that China was not seen as a threat to the United States. Is it another case of a failed promise by the presidency or a president-elect? Or is it a habit in which they have, and they'll say anything to get elected? The United States wouldn't know anything about true dialogue because the only language they speak seems to be violence. And my proof of this is we have a past history of military invasions based on lies and CIA-led coups. In order to save the betterment of humanity and for the future of global hegemony, we need to work better on our dialogue.